Does God need your mitzvahs?
Right. So my answer to this is God doesn't need my mitzvos. He wants them. And the reason that he wants them is because he has a plan for how human beings are supposed to live. Certain plan for Jews, certain plan for others. He wants to see us live according to this plan. This plan is Torah in the largest sense. Now what happens is that if we are not fulfilling that plan, then we're effectively distant from him. If we are distant from him, then this is a negative for him because his will's not being followed. But that's not the same thing as a need, because he is not affected, because he is in essence unchangeable. And therefore the problem that you're facing is a kind of tension between how you describe these things. That is to say, there is this God who is removed, so to speak, from what's going on in the world, and he cannot be changed. Then there are manifestations that we feel of God. Those manifestations may look like they are affected by whether I do or do not put on film today or whatever else it is. But in reality, it looks that way because that's my perception. So therefore, we are affected in reality. We're changed by whether we do these things or not. Hopefully changed for the positive by doing them. But God can't really be affected. It's just the lack of fulfillment of his will. And he wants us to fulfill that will.
So the lack of the fulfillment of his will doesn't affect him?
It doesn't affect him if you mean by affect him, change him. He's the same. Now what may be different, and this is these ideas of divine anger, etc., is what aspects of his, we could say, totality are felt by us in this world as a result of things happening around us. So we may think that we're living in a time of divine emphasis on justice and not mercy because people aren't doing what they are supposed to do. But no matter what, God is really the same. So when the Torah says that God got angry, it doesn't really mean he got angry. It means that things happen in the world as a result of his will that if a human did them would be anger. And from the point of view of Kabbalah, what's happened is that whereas the Ein Sof of God is completely unchangeable, the way in which other aspects of God's manifestation are functioning does change. And that simply is in reality how we perceive him, as you can see from the way Hasidus treats that whole idea of Sfirot, that it's the human side of how we perceive what's going on. It's not some real truth about what's going on. The real truth of what's going on is that there's an unchangeable God who wants us to be in a close relationship with him. And for that reason has provided a whole set of commandments and way of life, not only for Jews but non-Jews. And if we fail to do this, then it's not that he's changed. It's that, I use this expression, he's disappointed, but it's not an emotion. He doesn't have emotions. So it's not that he's lacking something. It's that what he wanted, his will, was not fulfilled.
But as a human, that would affect him. If I have a will and I think it's not, doesn't, and I don't get it, then I would be affected if he has a will and he's not.
So that's it, we're humans. He's not a human.
So if you're saying if his will is not completed, then that doesn't affect him.
See, the problem is in the word affect. I'm not sure whether the word affect is the right word for the following reason. If I say, we use this example, that a person is affected by, let's say, lack of oxygen. So that person is going to go through a process of serious physical change in an absence of oxygen, and to the extreme, of course, would be the end of that person's life. Now, so what do we mean by God being affected? If you mean God being affected, that this aspects of God that we perceive, described by Kabbalah as Sfirot, described by the Rambam as attributes, if you mean that these will be different, the answer is yes. But that's not God being changed. God can't be changed. All that is a permanent part of God, which may sort of, in certain ways, rotate around in this unity that we call God, and so we may therefore perceive different aspects of the divine in different ways, in different times. But that's not the same thing as needing something.
But if he doesn't have us in a close relationship, if we're not close with him, does that affect him beyond these manifestations? Does that touch him himself?
So here we have to separate two things. There is a level of which we speak of the relationship between God and Israel as a kind of ongoing love relationship like you see in Shir HaShirim. And he's running after us, and then we unfortunately don't pay attention, and then we're running after him, and maybe he's off doing something else. But the question is, how literally do we take this? This is the image of the way we relate to God. It's not the image of the real truth about what God is. This problem comes up with a lot of other problems. We speak, the whole Torah talks about God speaking. And whether you look at the Moreh Nevuchim or you look at the Zohar, it's quite obvious that what we call speech is not what's happening. It's a description of a way in which divine communication takes place, but it's not the same thing as what we call speech. And even if Moshe perceives it as if it's speech, it's not. So the point I'm making is we have this problem all the time. We're speaking in a language of humans to describe something that can't be described. So this whole back and forth of relationship, he's seeking us to follow his will. Do we follow it? Do we not? Do we bring him into our lives, homes, shuls, world, this concept of dira b'tachtonim? But yet none of that is the actual reality. It's the way we perceive and the way he wants us to perceive in order that his will be fulfilled in the kind of world and the kind of life that we are supposed to be living.
So how essential to him is his will?
If the divine will is part of the divine essence, then it's essential from that point of view. There are those who argue that the will and power and all the other stuff are basically attributes. Now, if you take that view, then none of it's essential to him. He himself is the unchanged thing. And all of these are simply manifestations of him, which are in essence perceptions by us, so that they are not reality. But now if you'll ask me, wait a second, you mean God doesn't care what we do? No, he does. Because he wants us to be living in the right way. He's come up with, invented a system which is supposed to create a kind of life, and it's supposed to tie us to the divine, we say above us, it's not really above, but beyond us, that we want to be connected with, and that's the ideal for humanity. And so he wants us to do those things.